Morning, Sarah. So good to have
Sarah.
you.
Hello. I'll just edit my name.
Morning, Sarah. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Is it noon time now in Australia?
Close.
Close to yeah. I was sharing with Peter. I would say it will be very beneficial for this group of teachers. Mainly from the group of teachers here, we have Asian teachers, and which is very exam orientated for information. And most of the teacher, I would say 90% of the students will go for the exams, and they'll try to finish their grade 8 before 12 years old, so they could get the direct school admission to the secondary school. Yeah, so I guess this question that the teachers will be asking will be surrounding how to choose the peers, how to pass with flying colors, how to get high distinction, any tips from the perspective from the examiners.
Okay.
Yeah. So Peter will be sharing from the first half, and the second half will be taken by Sarah, right?
No worries.
Good.
How was your morning teaching, Sarah?
Well, they forgot to come early. So anyway, I've just finished early. They were very apologetic. I usually teach in this time.
I see. Thank you
So,
so
but
much.
otherwise it was good.
That's amazing. When I'm looking at your biography, Sarah, you have so many different diplomas, and the teaching. It's amazing.
I think it's my hobby is getting new qualifications. So I've just started a Master of Teaching as well.
Oh, with your
So-
busy schedule.
Yeah. I study between 9 and midnight.
Oh. So how many instruments you are playing, Sarah?
I think it's around 30. If you 30 that I've done grade 8 or above in. Yeah, something like
You
that.
ever considered going for the Guinness World Record?
Well, for a recorder, I guess, like with recorder, it's one exam, but it's 6 instruments. So that maybe it doesn't quite count. And for flute, like there's 3 flutes, and for clarinet, there's 4 clarinets. So
Oh, so you're in the best qualification, I would say, for the exam board, because you know all the instruments.
I guess it's useful in this role. It is very useful. But I wouldn't advise anybody else be as silly as me. I think once you get more than 2 instruments, you can't keep them at the same level. So while I got my flute playing to a very high level, then I focused on saxophone for a bit. My flute playing dropped. So you can only ever really keep one at licentiate or above. They sort of fluctuate. So I sort of give each instrument a few months and then do another exam, and then I give another instrument a few months and do another exam. But I know parents say, oh, I want my child to do 5 instruments. I don't actually think it's a very good idea, even though I did it.
Okay, I think slowly, just give me a minute, huh? Let me co-host our master dealer. So in this group, we have master dealer that will enter their teachers. How we work from this group, Sarah, is like initially how we started on this group is like due to COVID. I think at that time I just came back from came back from Adelaide for MTSA, and then I was supposed to travel and to share about my books, and happened to be was COVID. So we started all this small group from online and to share with them how to use our book. Eventually the group grew bigger and bigger, so we start inviting guest speakers. Yeah, that's how we started off. Yeah, with this group. And therefore in this group we have our master dealer from different countries, from Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia. So they are the people that help to coordinate and invite the teacher. So usually when we run the session, beside to registering to come into this the Zoom, the rest of them, they will follow our master dealer. So over here, I have my master dealer from Sunray as well as from Everstrong Johanna.
Okay.
This is Mr. Wu from Sunray, and this is Peter Wang and Sarah.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, morning. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sunray.
Hi. Morning, Peter.
And Johanna is from JB. This is Peter Wang and Sarah Porter.
Hello, Joanna.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Sarah played more than 30 instruments, right? Yeah, and Peter speaks very well Chinese also. So 可以讲华语。
Oh.
That's a Mandarin session. Oh, Sarah speaks Mandarin too.
一点儿东西。
Goodness me, Sarah! Oh,
说的不好。
yeah. 你太聪明了，太聪明了。30 instruments.
不是。
I think now maybe our master dealer can slowly admit the rest of the teacher. So we'll get ready for the session, yeah? Hi, good morning, everybody. Just be patient with us. We're still admitting some of the teachers from the wait room. Morning, Uni. Morning, Angela. Morning, Christy. So for this group today, we have teachers from different countries, from Singapore. So Uni from Singapore, Christy is from New Zealand. And we have Winnie from Indonesia, and most of the teachers are from Malaysia, Singapore. We do have teachers from Philippines as well, and Hong Kong today. So you might want to just say hello to our speaker today, Peter Wang and Sarah Porter. And you might want to say hello to them and write in the chat group and tell them where you are from. Good morning, Jessica, Johnny, June, Marlene. Good morning, PW. Lynn Cobb, Jasmine, Matt, morning Tiffany, morning Chen Xi, Cecilia, good morning, morning Isabel, Chen Kong, good morning. Tai Ti, good morning. Henny, good morning. Colette, good morning. Grace, good morning. Johnny, good morning.
Good morning, Miss Alice.
Hi, good morning, Winnie. By the way, Sarah, Winnie is one of our oldest teachers from the group, and she's so willing to learn every session. You will see Winnie, and Winnie is from Indonesia. Amazing, right?
Lovely to meet you, Winnie.
Hi, Winnie. This is Miss Sarah.
I'm 74 years.
Wow.
And we have Miss Kong from Malacca.
I'm the youngest of all.
Yes, youngest. It's always so encouraging. And here, oh, Dr. Jason is coming in. I thought Dr. Jason's is really very amazing because he played the pianos, the violin, and other string instrument as well as harp. But Sarah, you are amazing. You play much more than him.
I don't think that makes anyone more amazing.
All right, we should start the session soon.
Very good background music. Yes.
Hi, good morning, Josephine. Jo also is a very experienced teacher teaching in Singapore. Morning, Ping Chen. Right, I think we should start the session now. Hi, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our GTM 67. And today's topic is online music exam marking criteria. And we have the privilege to have two guests today. And you can see that from the left side of the screen here, we have Peter Wang.
Hello, everyone.
And Peter is the founder of Con Brio Exams, and he's an XMEB examiner. And at the same time, you see this beautiful lady in red. On the right side, Sarah. Sarah is a very experienced examiner and very experienced teacher. And today, I just got to know that she played more than 30 instruments. Right. So you can ask any question, whether you are pianist and a guitarist, harpist, you can ask any question that you like. So I'll hand the time to Peter to start the session. All right, Peter?
All right. I'll just share the screen. Great. Can everyone all see the screen? Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. My name's Peter, and I'm very honored today to be invited back for another Finger Smart session. It's been a while, but then yes, we all missed Alice and James, the whole team. And so today we'll be discussing music examination tips with reference to Con Brio Exams and ABRSM marking criteria, and exciting tips on how we can achieve distinction and high distinction results. The whole lot. Okay, so really looking forward to discussing this with you. So I'll start off with a bit of background on myself. I'm the CEO and founder of Con Brio Examinations, as well as a former AMEB examiner for over 10 years. I taught at the Sydney Conservatorium as a senior piano teacher, and I'm also the head of school at Con Brio School of Music, where we've been awarded by the Australian Music Examinations Board for the most outstanding music school 9 years in a row. So I've done a lot of international adjudication for competitions and estimates, and I've had a lot of experience getting successful candidates, especially at diploma levels that we've gained over 100 successful diplomas throughout our years of running. So I'm hoping that with our years of teaching experience, we can share with you all some valuable examination preparation tips and how to achieve really good results. And then sometimes it just takes a bit of strategy, let's say. Okay, so let's going to the examination guidelines. So let's first talk about exam guidelines. As you can see, Con Brio exam guidelines and ABRSM have almost identical guidelines when it comes to performance assessment. And these marking criteria are actually quite commonly used at tertiary level across conservatories around the world. With Con Brio exams, we have number 1, the accuracy of notes and rhythm. Number 2, technical development and fluency. Number 3, quality of tone production and articulation. And number 4, stylistic understanding and phrasing. And number 5, performance expression and communication. So each category is given a score out of 6, adding to a total score of 30 per piece. And for ABRSM, we have pitch, time, tone, shape, and performance, and adding to a total of 30 as well. So later, our senior examiner, Ms. Sarah Porter, will be discussing these points in more depth and sharing with you from an examiner's perspective, what are the things examiners are looking for and more. But for now, I'll go straight to the points which I've put together on some of the ways that we can achieve really outstanding results, just more than just a pass, and how do we go that extra mile going to distinction, A+ or A level. All right, so here we go. Okay, I'll say it's all about planning and strategy. There's a lot of philosophical ideas behind the whole examination preparation. It's a mind game. It's like a mind game. It's all about getting the mindset right. I say number 1, before I do any demonstration, we'll talk about picking the right piece. Okay, I think picking the right repertoire is so important. I think we should make sure that we pick pieces that show the student's strength, not their weakness. Even though picking pieces which are good for students' development is very, very beneficial, and I do encourage all our teachers to do so. But I think when we're presenting for an examination or competition, I think it is important that we pick pieces that actually shows their strength and then their strong abilities. And I think there's a very important point to take in mind is that there's actually quite a wide range of spectrum of difficulties when it comes to choosing a piece, even when they're all on the same grade. For example, I just take an example, a more difficult piece on the grade 5 level could be a lot harder than a grade 6 piece on the easier end of the spectrum. Similarly, a easy grade 3 level piece would be very much similar to a grade 2 level, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so this is very important that we choose the right piece that actually delivers. I say this rule applies to all exam syllabus across worldwide. I think the reason being, I think we have to get this mindset right. It's very simple, but let's say if we just think in the mind of, Beethoven did not wake up one day and decide to write Fur-Elise to be included in a 5th grade exam, if you just think about that. I think there are parts of the piece that's always more difficult, more easy. And then for all exam syllabus, I think all our examiners, we work very hard to make sure that they're actually allocated into the right grade. But at times, it's always a little bit on the borderline of things. Okay, so I think that's number 1. So I think we have to be very, very strategic when it comes to choosing the right piece for an exam. And later, our lovely Sarah Porter will be going through with us on how to best to choose the 4th piece in an ABRSM exam. Okay, so that's that. Now, number two, so after we've gone through the right mindset of getting the right piece, let's think. I always say when we are teachers or exams, I think when we're preparing students for exam, we need to think a little bit more competitively. When I say competitively, I mean, how can we present a performance that, how can our performance or the student's performance sound better than another candidate if they were to present the same piece? I've actually just done a Vietnamese international competition. It's a Rising Stars Art Festival last weekend where we had over hundreds. It was 200-300 of candidates just listening to one after another throughout the 2 days, and it's quite a hectic, very exhausting job. But then when you have to listen through so many performances and marking these online or like live, you have to think from the mindset of the examiner as well. It's the same for competition. So exams, competitions, they're all very similar. Music performance, we're talking about, it's an art form, okay? It's a form of art. And art means it's quite subjective at times. There are no absolute correct answers, but how do we assess music from the examiner's perspective? You have to always understand that there are always comparisons. I think all candidates presented in exam will always, there will always be more or less a bit of a comparison. You're comparing the students before, the student after, the student earlier in the day, the student the day before, and then all the students that you've examined in the past. It's quite a lot of comparison. So there's not really like math or like standard academic subject, the right answer, the absolute correct answer, but there's always lots of comparing. Okay, so we have to, I think these two are the more fundamental mindset that we'll be speaking to. So, and then we're moving on to probably correct notes and rhythm. I say they're probably the basis of a performance. Okay, so that once you get that, I think you're in a good shape, to pass. But always, I say, I think with the technology advancement nowadays, I think always try to consult professional recordings or just any popular recordings on YouTube whenever you can, so that to make sure that we're not too far off or too different from a, let's say, a standalone interpretation of a piece, okay? I think when you're an artist, you want to make your own recording, you can be very special and have lots of personal ideas. But when you're in a competition or exam, I think we're all marking towards benchmarking, okay? We're always marking towards a specific guideline, yeah. Okay, so next we have, so in Con Brio exams, we actually put fluency and technique under the same category. Fluency, I'll say, is by far the most fundamental part of music playing. Number one, fluency. Avoid any hiccups, any pauses, any interruptions in your music. I think any sign of hesitation, just the slightest rhythmic fluctuation, we talk about varying speed. When it comes to more difficult sections, kids slow down, or easier part, they speed up. And all these are signs of insufficient techniques. So often we see examiners, they write on the report, technical development need to be further refined, or technical things here and there. It's always, I think the way how the examiners can hear that is because there's a technical, there's a lack of fluency, there's an interruption in the fluency, okay? So that's always, I think fluency and technique always come hand in hand, okay? When you have a good technique, you can actually control and then get your piece really fluent and very flowing, okay? So I say these are the key fundamentals, okay? Now, next, we'll be doing a bit of demonstrating. So pardon if some little mistakes here and there, but I'll doing some demonstrating using some of the more popular pieces, teaching pieces or exam repertoires, which you have taught or you may have taught or in the past or are teaching now. So let's go through these. Okay, some of the things I've prepared. Okay, today we talk about, number one, quality of tone. Okay, I say this, what I talk about is usually quite applicable across the whole range from a preliminary grade to advanced level to grade 8 and diploma levels and above. Okay, so all these qualities, they're all applicable across board. So quality of tone, often we mean a lot of good balance and good voicing. Okay, I'd like to first take an example when we do classical music, when we have any time, when we have a movement from a sonata or a classical piece, that we have this thing called Alberti bass. That's always very common. Okay, so I say this kind of Alberti bass, it's often played when we're listening. The examiner, I think at the very, very first instance, we can actually tell whether the student have a good listening skill or have a good attention to quality of tone, because often when you have a busy accompaniment figure like this, it's very easy to overpower the right-hand melody. So let's, for example, if a student was to present a piece 545 like this, first of all, I don't think they'll be at a distinction level or anywhere near it, because the highlighting of the melody isn't on top of the accompaniment. So the correct way I will be more looking for is that the right-hand melody can sit comfortably across all the Alberti basses in the left hand. Okay, this is actually very popular. We have the Kulao. So we have like that. All these Alberti bass, I think it's so common. I mean, very popular. Something that I've heard last week was the Moonlight Sonata middle section. So when it's really advanced, fast. And then the student that played with you know that the balance is slightly off, and then that's where you can't actually award a very high result with that. Okay, so I say Alberti bass is very common when it comes to presenting for examination. Okay, and voicing. So every time if you see the word voicing popping up in an exam report, we're talking about highlighting a particular note, a particular line or particular finger on top of multiple notes. So when we have double notes or triple notes, when we have chords, and then how do we actually achieve a beautiful melody line across that? And this is usually more applicable when it comes to more advanced repertoire. I'll say probably grade 6 onwards. Okay, so something like I'll just demonstrate with some Chopin that I have heard in the past. So when we have a student playing the Chopin Etude, Opus 10, number 3. So that as an opening versus another student that presents. Students that are able to highlight the melody on top of all the inside accompaniment, that will get the bonus point. Okay, and it's actually quite clear, and you can actually hear that whether it's a live competition or a recorded exam, and just I think with the modern technology, it's all actually quite clear. Okay, next I talk about clarity of finger work. So how do we compare clarity of finger work with one performance to the another? I'll take the example of Mozart 545, first movement. So I say often we hear running passages such as this. Like that. So a performance like this, I wouldn't be awarding the highest point, because that to me is a little bit, if I start to hear running notes, start hear semi-quiver passage, and especially in a Mozart or a classical style, I want to hear finger articulation. So when it comes to the more scalic part, I want to make that extra mile of effort to hear. I want to hear that difference, okay? So this is the sort of thing that I want to highlight, or like this examiner is actually looking for when we hear a particular passage. What are the candidate is actually doing that extra mile, how we're delivering that extra mile. And then we also have, on top of clarity of finger work, clarity of pedal work. I think pedal work is always very common. Okay, right from, let's say, 4th grade, 5th grade level, all the way up to the more advanced level. How do we get a nice pedal change? Okay, whenever we use the pedal, we start to listen for pedal changes. Okay, and then the student does well, and often the examiner will write, okay, clarity, good listening, and then a good clean pedal change or clarity in pedal work. And then the ones that don't do it so successful will write, do listen, because occasionally you have really, let's say, blurred pedal work, or the pedal change could be a little later, things like that. So I'll take the most famous example of Verlies. This is actually quite common because when we play, let's say, I'll say a more mediocre performance of this will be. Often where the students put the pedal down is actually often where the blur is, if they are not be careful to lift up their fingers. So when they do that, and we can hear from the examiner's perspective that, oh, pedal needs attention. The good students, they will be applying a more of a syncopated pedaling, so slightly delayed pedaling to get rid of all the little overlapping, the dissonance in between. Okay, so all, I say, very common, we have Chopin Nocturne. So that's where the bass, when it comes to the E flat to the D, and it's very interesting because especially on recorded exam, the examiner can actually see the student doing the pedal change. And then when they do the pedal change, sometimes you see, oh, they're doing it at the right spot, but then it still sounded blurry. That's because they haven't actually applied let's say, a syncopated enough pedaling to actually achieve that, or they're actually not listening, they're just doing the actual pedal application. So the good candidates that comes back, and then you can actually hear quite a difference to the example before. Okay, so that comes to pedaling. And next, I want to talk about, all under the sort of heading of the tone and production, the sound, is to exaggerate your articulation. Okay, and then this can be anything. I think this can be the clarity of the finger work, fast finger work, or little ornaments, or little decorative notes, or it could be legato touch, it could be staccato touch. Articulation is everything. It's just how we treat the sound, basically. Okay, I think sometimes the examiner can be just quite bored, and then they just write, focus on articulation, and what exactly are they talking about? And we're talking about things like all the way from a Turkish march, let's say a more mediocre performance, versus one that does a more clear ornamentation would stand out more from one that's not so clear and crisp, for example. Or when it comes to staccato, I think staccato is always very obvious. I think when student presents a piece like in the Hall of the Mountain King like this, versus one that does I think there's quite a degree of difference, you see? And then you have to just always think in the mindset of the examiner. When they've listened to so many versions of this piece, how can yours triggers, wakes them up, wake the examiners up, and what are the things that you can do to actually, wow, okay, in the right musical interpretation, of course. And of course, we have the Sugar Plum Fairy, it's the same idea. I think staccato is always easier to showcase the difference because you have the more flat staccatos, probably, versus more crisp. Things like that. So I think when you hear the differences and then actually to the examiner, that's where we can actually make a comment, because you have to actually have things for the examiners to write to actually award you the better mark. I think that's very important. So again, that's thinking from the mindset of the examiner's perspective. And next we have legato touch, also very important. I think legato touch is slightly more advanced technique. I think staccatos, we see a lot of lower grade to have staccatos and all that. I think legato touch is slightly more reinforced, I think, from the intermediate grades to the advanced grades. So for example, a Chopin nocturne such as this, if one candidate was to play versus one that does, especially from the recorded perspective, or you can actually see that intention of trying to achieve a legato touch. I think that it's worthy the examiners to actually comment on. You see, so that's when I say how we exaggerate, because sometimes it may make very little difference in the actual sound production, especially through the internet or through the actual recording quality. But if you actually see an effort that's been made, that the students trying to achieve really well connected fingers and all that, and then that's something that the examiners would try to be encouraging and right. Well done on the stylistic and understanding, and then there's evidence of good legato touch, things like that, you see? So that's the sort of thing. And then next, moving on to the musical direction and playing style. I think if anything, always do more and then to do less. I think always do more, like when we talk about, let's say from the lower grade, we have the grade 2 Menuet in G. I think all the candidates comes back and separates the left hand. It's actually a good moment for the examiner to actually write, oh, good understanding of the style. You're trying to imitate the sound of a harpsichord. It's not necessarily right or wrong, but if you do that extra mile, I think it gives the examiner the opportunity to actually write something on positive about your performance. Okay, so that's the imitation of the harpsichord. And then of course we always have clear dynamic contrast whenever you can. I say always exaggerate, because a lot of the time I think in live performances or in video performances, you want to do more so that the examiners can actually receive that. Because if you do 100%, the examiner can, I think over the internet, over everything, all the other factors, I think we can only receive probably 70–80%. So if you only do 70%, I think the examiner can only receive about 50%. And sometimes they may not think that you're actually doing it. So things like having clear dynamic contrast, we have Turkish March. So that versus one, if they just to play both time the same, I think there's not a lot of room for the examiner to actually encourage that aspect, you see? So I think whenever we can, always try to do more, always try to do more exaggerated. And the next point, I think the next point is, I say, one of the most important, quite a differentiator when it comes to B plus or like a B performance, or just a passing to a performance to a distinction level or to a high distinction level. I think probably distinction to a high distinction level, that's where it lies, is the element of phrasing, musical phrasing. I think I wrote phrasing, phrasing, phrasing. And I think that's just one that candidates seem not to be doing enough of. Often when they play, they tend to play, let's say, once they get the notes right, get the rhythm right, get some dynamics in, that get some pedal. But if they can actually have a nice phrasing, and I think this is where examiners across board, whether it's Trinity, whether it's ABRSM or Con Brio Exams, that's where we can actually award that extra plus or the extra high distinction. When it comes to phrasing, I think there's, again, no right or wrong answers, okay? No right and wrong answers, but as long as you're doing something in the more, let's say, logical musical direction, you'll be awarded that point. I think if we're just going back to the example of K545, so I'll play you a one that's more mediocre without phrasing, even with good balance. That's one performance. Another candidate comes in and play. That will be a difference. Okay, so that we'll hear that there will be really clear ups and downs in the music, where the highlight of where the contour of the shape, the musical shape is, and then how at the end of phrases, if you go slightly lighter, slightly softer, and these are all really satisfying musical ideas. And then when the candidate can do that, and it's like basically from 505, if right from the opening, we know where the candidate sits. We really know just where the candidate sits. When they can deliver that in the opening phrase, we know this candidate's either an A or an A+, just depending on how the rest of the piece go. And I mean, it's everything. It's everything from the more classical piece to all the way to even popular music. I think when you play popular music, if you can incorporate the idea of phrasing, that's where it's gonna give you that extra mile, extra plus on your exam result. This is Harry Potter. So even in Harry Potter, if we just play all flat, and then if we play it with musical shaping, more, less, more and less, and then start less and grow, and less. So there's little ups and downs, and then to make your music really colorful. And then that, you see, music is subjective. Art is, it's very subjective. It's all very personalized. And then, but if you have a lot of things to say in your variation in your sound, and overall you present a very nice package for us to actually comment on. And examiners are there to encourage you. I think that's also the other thing. I think we want moments where we can actually write good things about you rather than pick your weaknesses. I think for any examiners or adjudicator to see the student suffer, I think it's like, poor thing, like, oh, maybe you should have taken an easier piece, like, or something that you're more comfortable with. I think we're all there to be more encouraging. So I think that's where I say we have to always be very strategic and very clever, I think, when it comes to how we prepare this whole package. And last but not least, of course, the overall presentation, from the way you dress, your posture, your facial expression, the quality of the video, the angle of the video, the whole background, the whole lot. I think it's a whole package when it comes to examination. And of course, as Alice was saying earlier, with the CID, the communication, the interpretation, and the delivery, I think this all comes in as a whole, I think, icing on cake, the whole package. So I think that sort of covers the sort of the whole spectrum in terms of how I look at when I'm examining or when I'm adjudicating, or I think that's something that I've discussed. Just a little summary, okay? It's not necessarily the only way to do it. Of course, it's not the only way to do it. It's probably one way of looking at things, okay? That I hope that can be really beneficial to the OL teachers that are here today. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, so now I'll pass it to Sarah so she can elaborate on the things that I've spoke, and to give us more insight on the ABRSM preparation as well.
Thank you so much, Peter. I just wanted to add a couple of things that maybe I feel when I'm examining students, and one is about the category that is fluency, and in ABRSM it's called time. And one thing I noticed with this is students will sometimes understand that the first beat of the bar is the loudest, but they don't remember to control the volume of every other note in the bar or every other note in the phrase. And so they get these accents in the phrase, and those accents interfere with the sensation of the rhythm. The rhythm needs to have a feeling of pulse. It can be flexible, but it always needs to have this forward momentum that says the pulse is moving forward. And unintentionally, if we're doing an Alberti bass, if we're accidentally accenting the thumb, for instance, suddenly it sounds syncopated. Or if we're doing a scale run and we're accenting the fourth finger or the thumb when we pass under, it interrupts that line. So if the student can imagine a mountain or some image of the phrase and then listen critically, if we're talking about recorded exams, they can come back and listen. Did you do that well? Have you accidentally accented notes? Sometimes I ask students to unaccent notes, accent the first beat of the bar, unaccent the second, and the third, depending on whether it's 3/4 or 4/4, maybe half accented. But I actually made up words to describe this sensation of that accidental accenting, and it so often detracts from a performance. Another thing I wanted to mention is that with examiners have empathy. When a student comes in and completely mucks up, the examiner's not sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, this student didn't do enough practice. But just because I think, oh, that poor student's so nervous, and I'm sure they normally play better than that, that can't change how the mark is. The mark is based on that performance. So for ABRSM distinction, it says it has to be highly accurate notes and intonation. So a student may be nervous on the violin, and because they're tight, their fingers don't quite land in the correct place. But I can't say that's highly accurate notes and intonation, even if I understand why they're not getting the highly accurate notes and information. It still pulls it down to that merit category under pitch. And same for performance quality. The ABRSM says that the performance needs to be assured and fully committed. So if the students they're shaking and the tone is a bit insipid, that's not fully committed. That's not vivid communication. So there's that aspect that we want to know that the performer is communicating with the audience. For both exams, ABRSM and Con Brio, there is a performance category, and it is very different. The way I conceive these the two boards, and I use both, and I've used ABRSM since 1996 and Con Brio since I discovered recorded exams. And if you want me to go into that, I think recorded exams are the best thing since sliced bread, as far as student progression, as far as letting the student learn at their own pace. And I could speak for hours on that. But this performance category, if we're looking at the ABRSM exam, that's a whole one-take exam. So the student is not only marked on their pieces, and all their pieces could be in the highly accurate, but they're also marked on the whole impression of the concert. And that involves some sort of acting. It's like being on stage and we're acting, and between pieces we're acting. Between pieces we need to give space for this piece was Baroque and now I'm changing into some jazz. So the mood changes, and I've got to give that enough space for the audience to feel, oh, now we're starting a new mood, but not too much space that the audience thinks, oh, I'm going to walk out and leave. So if we watch the exam video that the students recorded on the basis that we're watching a concert, how well does that student maintain the concert throughout? And I would say this is a very hard thing to do. And a lot of teachers have been shocked that their students didn't get the mark they expected, thinking, oh, no scales, this is an easier exam. That category is super hard. And I reckon, I won't tell you how old I am, but when I was 40 was the first time I did an exam, and I really felt, and we use the term flow, I really felt in the flow that I could can control that concert feeling from beginning to end without dropping it. So that's something. And for Con Brio, to me, I regard it as like training for recording. Many of our students are not going to be performers on stage. The number of jobs for performers on stage is limited. The number of opportunities for our students to have careers that involve recording is much higher. And a Con Brio exam records each piece individually. So they only have to maintain the concert for one take, for one piece. You can do as many takes as you like, but it's only one piece. So there's not the marking for that space, but how do you move from the end of one piece to the beginning of the next, but there is that mark from the moment I set the mood for the piece to the moment the recording stops. There's how well am I communicating in that space? Now that is consistent with recording artists who do record one take at a time. And so in light of that, the performance mark in Con Brio is 10%, as opposed to the 30 out of 150. So in light of the fact that the exam is targeting something that is different, so for me as a teacher, I use both for different reasons. And definitely for ABRSM, I love so much about both boards. So I do work for Con Brio, but I love ABRSM because I think that is such it's a hard standard for, especially for a young child. But the examiners are very fair and they're very consistent, and the criteria is very, very well laid out. So if you can actually access it on their webpage, if you Google ABRSM criteria, it comes out, and you can very clearly hear your students recording and actually mark, oh, well, this is in a merit range. It's largely accurate notes and intonation. Now I've lost where I was going with that. Oh yes, but sorry, with the Con Brio one take exam, that's an excellent preparation for the next. So here we're going to master our pieces and we're going to get examiner feedback. And now that we've mastered the pieces, now let's join those pieces together and master the concert. So I think they complement each other really, really well. So yeah, I think that's most of what I had to add.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. I like your description, you know. Yeah, and it's how you feel like, you know, the mountain and how you shape, you know. This is really, I think the student can actually visualize. You know, while you are sharing just now, I think one of the questions, this is a question from parent. The parent asked this question, since it's a recorded exam, will the examiner play back and listen and check my child's mistake? Play back the video and check many times.
Rewind.
Rewind. And that's why the questions from parents.
So I can answer that from an ABRSM perspective. They're actually allocated time to exam. There isn't really time to rewind and re-listen. However, if an examiner was to rewind and listen again, it actually acts in the student's favor. Because sometimes we hear something and go, oh, that sounds wrong. That's the first impression. But on second listening, we go, actually, what they're doing is accenting the wrong note, or it wasn't actually a wrong note. Oh, they tried to do a ritardando. They just didn't do it in a way that was organic. So from a parent's perspective, it acts in their favor that an examiner can listen twice rather than acting against. Even think, oh my goodness, that means they'll notice the mistake. It actually means they'll probably understand the mistake better.
Right. So not to worry. In fact, there's still allocate time, right? So not to worry that the examiner will just play back and recheck and recheck. And I think I like what Peter have shared just now. You see, examiner is there to encourage you, but not to criticize your point. So that's what we want to ensure parents as well as teachers and the students. Let's look at the chat group here and see if we have any questions here. Right, you may feel free to write your questions. Then I have a few questions here from the teachers. Since, you know, recorded exam, and some parents or teachers would like to know, is there any tips for the selection of the fourth piece? Any preference from the examiner point of view?
There's no preference, that for sure. There is no preference. The whole concept of free choice is that we can allow our students to follow their own interests. Whereas a curriculum that says you can only pick one A, B, C, there's benefit to that. But it does also limit a student, particularly a student who maybe is losing interest. And this fourth piece, or in Con Brio's case, all three pieces are free choice. That gives the student the chance to go, okay, well, you know, she's making me practice this horrible romantic piece when really I want to play early Baroque. And so they can follow that interest. I keep trying to tell my students that early Baroque is better than modern. One day they'll believe me. But, you know, if that is their interest, they can follow it. And as a child, my mother made me practice 45 minutes on what my teacher told me to do and 15 minutes on whatever I wanted. And I held out for that 15 minutes. That was my favorite part of every hour. And I practiced 4 hours a day to get that extra 15 minutes because I wanted that special time when I could just follow what interested me. So now, but of course there's a problem when we've got an own choice. How do we make sure it's of the appropriate standard? This is a really hard question. This is a question that's asked on our Facebook group all the time. Is this piece appropriate? And look, anybody is welcome to ask on the Facebook group. Is this appropriate for the grade? And you'll get a range of opinions. But for me, I would look at, if I'm picking for ABRSM particularly, that is an off-qual regulated exam. That means that any other board that is off-qual regulated, their syllabus will be equivalent. I can look at any syllabus back to 1960. Nancy Litton has posted a lovely list of the ABRSM pieces since 1960. Any piece on there listed under grade 4 is going to be appropriate. Full stop. And same for Trinity syllabus, same for London College of Music, probably same for MTB. They're all off-qual regulated. So we know that as long as we choose from those, the piece is definitely approved. If we don't want to choose from those because there's something else that really catches our students' fancy, we can ask for a second opinion from the group. And there's lots of people in the ABRSM exams group who are knowledgeable on these sorts of things. I'm not so good at picking grades for things myself. This is why I rely on the off-qual, the options of the off-qual boards.
Okay, let's look at the question. Oh, this is from Miss Taiti. Hi. May I know how many pieces for 5 minutes finger gyms students are all 5 years old? Oh, so I think Miss Taiti is asking for the preliminary exam for Con Brio exam. By the way, for those who are using our finger gyms, the last 7 pieces from our finger gym are shortlisted for the Con Brio exam. So you may use those pieces, but you can check from the exam list. Yeah, okay, I think this is your question. So same thing happened to our piano gym, level 1 to 4. So some of the pieces, not all the pieces, because these are finger studies. So some of the difficult ones with the transpositions, so the student will need to play all the transpositions for this exam. So you may check out or from the exam syllabus. Yeah. Right, here I have another question. I think I'm asking this question on behalf of some of the teachers here. The common question here in Asia, especially in Singapore, we have this very special DSA, which we call is direct school admissions in Asia, whereby the student will get to some of the elite school when they have their grade 8 or grade 6 done when an early age as young as 9 or 10 years old. So now the problem is that now since this recorded exam, so some of the parents say, since there's no requirement for oral skills for the performance grade, why do we still need to buy those books, oral skills, sight reading? Since there's no requirement for all this, why do teachers still waste our lesson time on going through skills, oral, sight reading, listening skills, keyboard improvisatory skills and all this? So I think from your experience and what is the tips or any wise words that you can share with teacher, how do we tackle all this group of parents?
Do you want to answer, Peter, or do you want me to?
Maybe for both of you, I think.
So it's something that has always been the case, and that is that there's always been good and bad teachers, and there's always been good and I shouldn't say good and bad students who are willing to comply and students who are not willing to comply, and that has not changed. In the past, when sight reading and oral were compulsory, these were known as some of the and scales the lowest marking sections in the exam, where a student might be 29 out of 30, 29 out of 30, 29 out of 30, but they neglected those 3 sessions and they were marked down. This was common and it hasn't changed. But the question, if a parent is asking me, why should we still do oral theory, etc.? Do you want your child to have a grade 8 certificate and not be able to play the piano? Because if they can get a grade 8, it's one thing to pass an exam, but it's another thing to be able to play music. Now, both are important, but I experienced this at school. All my friends did grade 8 A and B. We all got A. And then at church on Sunday, someone said, can someone play a hymn? The pianist is sick. And everybody else said, I'm sorry, we didn't learn it. That they did grade 8, but they have no skills. So, and the extra thing, if you really, you just want that grade 8 certificate and you don't mind whether your child can play the piano or not at the end of it, that they will get a better mark if they have good oral skills, because those oral skills will help with their musical phrasing. The sight reading skills will help with the learning of the pieces, so they will get to the grade 8 faster. And scales will help in playing those beautiful runs evenly so that they get that mark for fluency. So these sections are important if we want our child or student to learn music. Sure, they can get an exam, and I can tell you I got 99% for Spanish at university, but I can't speak a word. I can't have a conversation with someone. I got 99%, and I actually apologized to my classmates saying, yes, I got out. Sorry, the dog is barking. Can we get the dog outside? Sorry. I will let Peter answer while the dog barks. Go for your life, Peter.
Oh, sure. No problem. I think Sarah did a very, very good job in answering that question. I think, Alice, I think especially, I think it all comes down to how we educate the parents. I think it's very important. I think with Sarah's approach, I think it's very, very well tailored, and how we break down, all these aspects, all the, let's say, add-ons, isn't it? All the little bonus side dishes, and why do we do those, and how do we incorporate them into the actual lesson, and then how is it beneficial? I think that's at the end of the day, because I understand, like we do teach a lot of, there's always a big, let's say, group of parents that are very purpose driven, and then sometimes they just want the shortest cut or like the quickest way, to get to the point A to point B. And I think it's very important for us teachers to actually educate them the whole philosophy behind this whole music learning as a whole package, because I think to give them lots of examples, like Sarah was doing, I think at the end of the day, like you want your children to be able to play music for the enjoyment's sake, or for distress, or for anything when life happens, they have that special ability. I think that's very, very important. I think it's all about how we educate the parents.
Thank you. It's come from a lot of...
Can I just add that the fastest way is not the shortcut. Learning is always like a pyramid, and the foundation level is where we need to cover the most stuff. Sometimes young teachers make this mistake. Oh, grade preliminary is easy, grade initial's easy, grade 1's easy, grade 2. They get to grade 3 or 4 and the student collapses because they don't have the foundation. But if we spend longer on the foundation, getting the reading strong, getting the sight reading strong, getting the oral strong, then it speeds up. And I find for myself, when I spend so much time on the foundation, that actually the students do 5, 6, and 7, and 8 incredibly quickly. It's almost just feels like, oh my goodness, I need reins to pull you back. So always that the importance that the pyramid is the right way up. If you've got an upside down pyramid, there it is, it tumbles. Because grade 8 is the biggest grade. But to my students, grade 8 is the smallest grade, because they learned all those skills in grade 1.
Great, Sarah, thank you. I think this leads actually to another question, because for performance grade that which actually do not require oral skills and sight reading for the past 2 years, so will this lead to a kind of imbalance or not holistic learning, or it's called like malnutrition style of learning? Yeah, so I think from sharing from Peter and Sarah, it's not complete, and we teachers, that we really have to take some action on the educating part, and we still have to insist on all these very fundamental things, right? However, I do believe there are some young teachers, it could be misled to another direction. They thought, wow, performance grade is so easy. You can record, you can play many, many times. So we don't have to waste times on skills and oral and sight reading. They can just imitate on the fingers and play. So eventually we will foresee in the future, you will lead to two mainstream of learner. One will just simply think that performance, just play without understanding, that's okay as long as the kids could imitate. And the other group will still faithfully come back to learning the skills. And so what is your take and what is your advice for the teachers now?
I would say, repeat what I said before. There has always been good and bad teachers, and there's always been teachers whose students did not do well in those 3 extra sections. The difference now is, of course, those students may come out with a distinction at grade 8 because they're not examined on those sections, but they will not have the same set of skills as a musician. So yes, there's a potential that bad teachers are still going to not want to teach those sections. That's not going to change anything. And as good teachers, we all will try our hardest to encourage our students to be enthused by the extra categories in the exam. But yes, it's not a new problem that there are teachers out there who can barely sight read, who can barely do oral because they scraped through their grade 8.
It's just like learning, picking out a hobby, like learning a new language. Do you know that Sarah's don't hold any degrees or in Chinese, but 她讲华语耶。Hi Sarah, 你好。
任熙，你很高兴。
是吗？哎呦，你看我们是不是在学习的当中学一个语言，不是要拿那个文凭，对不对？而是你能不能够把这个语言用得很好，在你的生活上。So I think this is a very good example. I just came to know that Sarah speaks fluently, in Mandarin. That's amazing. So when you ask her that, do you have a grade 8 cert of Chinese speaking? I don't think that she has, right? And the same thing, if we are, teaching the kids and what we want to do. So this is a question I always ask the parents. What do you want in your child's music learning? Do you want this as a gift that it becomes a lifelong hobby of your kids? Or you just simply want to achieve your grade 8? And you just pack and just frame your grade 8 certificates in your studios and tell everybody that I have a grade 8 but I can't play anything. So that's what, again, we come back to the educating of this parent. I think we have a question here for Sarah. I think Christy asked this question. This is a question for Sarah. Your ABRSM Facebook page has been a fantastic resource. So for those that do not know, Sarah is the moderator for the Facebook, ABRSM Facebook page for the forum. So is wondering if this Facebook page created by you personally out of love or by ABRSM with you as a spoken person?
So I was a member of the page, and the person who was the admin was a 13-year-old girl who started the page because she didn't know where to ask questions. But then she finished learning piano and life went on, and the page was being trolled by spammers, and she said, would anyone help? And I just replied, I don't mind helping. And all these other people said, please, pick me. And I just said, I don't mind helping if you need someone. And she chose me. Of all those people, she chose me. And so, but it's been such a blessing. It's that ABRSM has contacted me appreciating the work that we've done on that page. It's not an official ABRSM page by any stretch, but they appreciate that. Firstly, I'm not standing there going ABRSM is the only way. And they know that I'm very open and honest, that all the music boards are a tool in our toolbox. But at the same time, many teachers use ABRSM. And so having that access to be able to ask a question of our colleagues, or for a parent to ask a question of fellow users of ABRSM, is such a helpful resource. It does mean, of course, that the answers aren't always going to be 100% reliable, but I do try and watch it. But even for me, I do not work for the ABRSM. I do not have any inside knowledge. So I'm going to get some things wrong, but luckily I have people who email me go, you said the wrong thing. I've been really blessed. And when I asked the ABRSM if they'd do some webinars, they were over the moon. They said we were waiting and looking forward to this day. So yeah, it is an unofficial page, but I am very thankful when people say it's a blessing to them, because that is my purpose once I became admin of it.
It's a wonderful page, actually, and they're very active. And in fact, I noticed that Sarah's have been inviting different speakers to share in the portal. For example, the jazz pianist and the author, Christopher Norton, have been very active in the group, sharing on the exam pieces and answering the question. So if you are the teachers or parents, you may follow the page, you may ask questions. By the way, I noticed Sarah is very, very quick in answering all those questions. Yeah, is this the grade 4 exam piece or grade 5 in clarinet? What is the alternate pieces, the choice? What is your opinion? And Sarah will answer instantly. Yeah. Next.
That tells you I spend way too much time on Facebook.
For good, for good. It's really blessing to a lot of people, right? So you may, for Con Brio Exam here, we have the website here, www.com, Con Brio Exam. So if you're interested, you may click on to know more about this. So asking about registration. So could someone answer these questions? Next, from WK, the problem is that when people can get a grade 8 qualification without knowing how to read music or how to listen, it devalues the qualification, and everyone, including those who are good all around, will be painted with the same brush. So what is your advice on this? Yeah. And WL further has also have commented, in Hong Kong, many teachers have only grade 8 as their qualification. They also only have a knock-off effect on the music education. The next batch of teachers will know how to play, much less teach skills. It comes to, I think, let me just answer a little bit of this, and before we hear the sharing from Peter and Sarah. I think this group of teachers won't stand long in the market, I would say, because the students that they produce, I think parents that's very smart now, they could Google, they would do a lot of comparison. They will see why the kids actually, you know, get less result, or I would say the kids as compared to the friends or so that who has a better teacher, they would see the difference. So not to worry on those group of teachers. So what we need to keep up with our own teachings, that we know that these are important things that we have to keep on going, even though which is not needed for the exam also. So I think Sarah have also have shared just now what is the difference of the one time of the performance from AB exam with the 4 pieces, which is not just the performance, it's just a concert. And I pretty like the way that she says acting. You need to act in the concert. How do you capture the attentions of your audience, right? So these are very important. So if not that you have more less committed students, or they just want to pick out a hobby also, you might also take this the one take for the Con Brio exam, because you just record one exam. Actually, for us, what we do here from my center is that we will ask the student to do their mock exam for Con Brio. So to build the stamina, once they have learned out all the pieces, then they will have one take and dress up very nicely. So this is how you may brand yourself, what type of teachers you are from the market. Right. So maybe now I'll throw the ball to Peter, and Peter, maybe you can just share, or maybe what is advice to the teachers regarding this?
No, I think you're right. I think the result will speak for itself. And I think because music education, we're talking about long term. And then so I think if anything, in long term, I think the benefit and then of all these, all the different components that you actually incorporate in your teaching, it will all show as a result. And I think like Sarah was mentioning earlier, I think I'd just like to stress it again, and all these examination boards, they're all just tools in your toolbox. I think that's such a wonderful expression, I think, because I think at the end of the day, I think all these, whether it's ABRSM, Trinity, CBE, and then AMEB, they're all, let's say, accreditation, a mark of achievement, and then a framework of goals that you can actually set towards your teaching and then towards the students' learning. And then, of course, if you really want to do it professionally, you will go to the conservatory and then to actually do professional training. But I think I think as teachers and parents, they just have to be very open-minded. I think as I was stressing before, I think to have the right mindset is just so important, that you use these for the benefit, if it's useful, if it's actually very complementing to your own teaching, and if that's actually very good, beneficial for your own kid. Because the reason why Con Brio exams is so quite flexible in the choice of repertoires, and just like the 4th piece in the ABRSM syllabus, you know, the same reason that Sarah was answering regarding using that particular piece as a motivator to the playing, to the students' learning. I think it's just so important, because when I was studying at the conservatory, I remember one professor once talked about I think this is a very important phrase, I'll quote, is life is too short to play the piece that you don't like. I think at the end of the day, if you don't have that, if whatever syllabus that you use, if it doesn't bring up your motivation, if it doesn't bring up that a will to learn, it's zero. It's zero whatever that you do, whether you get a grade A or whether you get anything. If it's gonna stop, it's game over. I think at the end of the day, it's all about triggering that motivation. How can we design the system better? I think Sarah's work with all the ABRSM forum is so beneficial, and because it's just lots of people's input. It's such a valuable feedback, and then they're all teachers and then parents who want the best for their children. And I think and then examining board, I think like ABRSM and like Con Brio Exams, we all take very seriously in terms of how, because we actually contribute to the development of the students' learning. I think that's just so important. Yeah.
And also we have putting the grade 8 issue aside, this is a concern. It is always a concern that we have people teaching that do not have adequate training themselves. And sometimes they can perpetuate issues like physical issues that cause tension and can cause body injury down the track. That is always an issue. But another issue we have, and I think this is where Con Brio comes to its forefront, is that we have students who are going to quit. We have students who we just can't motivate to practice enough to do 4 pieces. We have students who can't concentrate for long enough to do a one-take exam. And that's not to say that I am saying the one-take exam is a bad idea, but it's matching our tools to our students. If this student's going to quit because they only like early Baroque and they do not want to play classical and romantic, of course, that's all my students, that okay, give them an exam which is all early Baroque. Give them an exam that's in their interest. If we can keep them playing and keep their love of music going, even if maybe we're not doing our preferred course, if we can keep them moving forward, then the enthusiasm can be reignited. And I think that's something where Con Brio really stands out as an option. Yes, of course, you know, we can go, but they should learn Baroque, sure, or they should learn modern, or whatever it is, your era that you want your students to learn. Yeah, sure, this is ideal. Sometimes our students are not ideal in the attitude. Maybe they're teenagers and they're impossible to motivate. I have one here, I love him to death, but will I convince him to do a one take? I'm lucky if I can convince him to do a one-piece recording without grunting at me, you know. And so this is where we can if we can keep our students feeling they're moving forward in whatever way possible, then we can maybe hold on to them and give them that option as an adult, as a future career. Remember that if for our parents, that maybe they don't think their child should be a musician. Maybe they want their child to be a lawyer or a doctor. But what happens in 20 years when our students are adults and they invent a wonder drug that doctors aren't needed anymore? They still have their grade 8. They still have their diploma as their backup career. Oh no, I've lost my job as a doctor, but I can teach music. So it's worth it to keep their motivation going and to catch their motivation, because it doesn't need to be your career. I tell them all the time, you don't have to follow my footsteps, but I want you to have the option that you can do that. So this is where this free choice concept is so important, because we can grab our students. When in the past, there was a high drop off at grade 2, there was a high drop off at grade 5. When it got harder at grade 2, it gets harder about then, and it gets harder at grade 5 when the examining criteria changes a little bit, particularly for A and B, they're divided into levels. And there's a huge drop off there, because if they've rushed through the foundation, they can't get past grade 5, or they struggle to get past grade 5. But in the benefit of the recorded exams is we can catch them and help them not drop off before it's too late, because you never know what's going to happen later with the interest. I wanted to quit until grade 7. I hated piano. After grade 7, I loved it to death. And I'm here this many years later.
Well, thanks, Sarah, for your sharing. You know, that reminds me, because I found out about a month ago, so I need to go back to the hospital for checkup. And the hospital has a grand piano at the lobby. So I noticed actually the hospital engaged professional pianists to play. But I do see some famous faces that I know they are not the professional pianists, but they play better than the professional pianists. In fact, they are the doctors. They have cardiologists that, you know, just play the piano during their lunch break or came earlier to play the piano, and then with their gown again, they move up to the office or the hospital. So I think these people are really amazing. So in Singapore, we have a group of lawyers and doctors. They perform, doctors and lawyers, they perform regularly as pianists as well. Amazing, amazing. I think these people are too smart. I think both of their brains on the right and left that developed too fast and too much. Yeah, so they could actually do both. Yeah, so I think that's interesting what Sarah talked about, like, you know, play the pieces that want to keep up with the interest. And just now, Peter do share on how the performs on this, you know, like Harry Potter. I think just a reminder for teachers, because sometimes when we're choosing some of the modern pieces or light-hearted pieces, we just tend to just simply play, you know, the notes, you know, without looking in the details. So I think the illustration and the reminder from Peter is really very important, like how you still build the phrasing, look at the sequences and others. Huh? So this is a reminder. Here comes to another question from Tiffany. Say, for students who are more interested in pop songs, play using chords, should they still go for the ABRSM exam? What is your advice for this teacher?
My advice is, if you don't think the student is going to get have a chance of getting a merit or higher, then I wouldn't push them to do it because then it becomes disheartening. We want our students to feel motivated. So if they are really only going to practice one era, then I would say we keep working on them to try and get them interested in the other eras. But this is where Con Brio really has a strength, where we can say, okay, that's what they like. And I actually tell students, the same as I tell my children, you know, this is a new food. You've never had it before. You don't want to eat it. Just have one mouthful. So I had a student who came to me, and she's an adult, and she only likes this horrible stuff, the anime stuff. And I said to her, just try 2 lines of this early Baroque piece from your book. Just try 2 lines of this Bach piece. You don't have to taste the whole piece. I just want you to taste it. I mean, you don't have to take the whole piece. Just taste the piece. And this can be helpful, because in this case, she's come back and she said, actually, now that I've played those 2 lines of this early Baroque piece, I want to finish it. Or with Bach, she actually said, actually, this didn't float my boat, but I enjoyed the experience and I've got a better appreciation for it. But then 2 lines is only a taster, and kids' tastes can change, adults' tastes can change. So I would never put a student in for exam unless I think that they're going to do decently. And I will match the exam to the student so that they can.
Right, thanks, Sarah, for your advice here. By the way, I have not sent the student for the Trinity exam for their pop exam, but I do know that if you want to know, I think Eugene from the Regionals Trinity Exam Board has shared that they do have the pop exam, so you might want to look into this from the website. And also, I think if students like to play pop, they know the exam criteria, or the main purpose is for them to learn different types. So this might not be the cup of tea. So the student might want to choose festival, maybe go for festival or some performance without going for the exams. I think we have another very interesting question also. Huh? Yeah, this is from Cecilia. I say, hi, Sarah. This is a question for Sarah. Face-to-face and digital exam are available at ABRSM now. What do you think if I enroll my student, either one at different grades, so that we can expose to both types? So digital at grade 2, face-to-face at grade 4, etc. Thanks. Yeah.
I noticed that everyone seems to like me better than Peter. Just saying. I'll pay you later, Cecilia. So personally, if I talk about my own children, because, you know, with our own children, we care so much. In these days, this was sort of before the internet and definitely before recorded exams were a thing. But the Suzuki method has been recording exams since 1940. They didn't call them exams, they called them graduations. And no student could fail. They made sure that was part of the system. It was a teacher who was responsible if they submitted a not good enough recording, not the student. All students just passed. There was no mark. So this concept had been around, and I was trained as a Suzuki teacher. So my kids did Suzuki. When my son was 5, he could not stretch enough to do Alec Turka. And so at this point, I thought, I would like to stretch him horizontally. And that's when I started making all my students do ABRSM exams as well, so that he already had this very high level of performance skill, but he hadn't done that face-to-face exam experience. And he was still very young. So rather than keep pushing him to be the world's best whatever at age 6, that wasn't in my interest. My only interest was I wanted them to finish music before they became teenagers and wanted to go in other directions. So I went, okay, you can do the exams. And this way, we were able to spread this way: scales, oral, sight reading, and really develop those. Once his hand was big enough, we then continued with Suzuki. We actually did them side by side with the ABRSM diplomas. So I think that your compromise solution, Cecilia, is an excellent concept. That yes, there is so much benefit to a recorded exam. There is also a different set of benefits to a face-to-face exam. One of the issues for a face-to-face exam is you can't practice doing it. And I know that one person in this room mentioned that he knew someone who enrolled in the same exam 16 times in a session so that they could practice the exam environment, because it's a different environment. And I was 40 before I could walk into an exam room and feel like I was in command of the situation. Most children haven't done enough exams to be 40 and be walking into an exam room with confidence. So it is a different experience, and it's one that they can't practice in the same way they can practice for a recorded exam. So I think your compromise is an excellent concept that I'm giving you as a student both experiences, whether you work at one every second year or one every grade, or you do one recorded exam and one face-to-face exam for each grade level. And that actually can be quite good too, because I say to a student, I want you to be distinction level. If I'm doing a recorded exam, I can say, okay, we've done these recordings, they're only going to get merit. Should we submit them, or do you think we can do better? Actually, they will all say they want to get HD, high distinction anyway. But we can reflect on it and decide before we submit it. When we come to a face-to-face exam, I will tell my student, you are distinction level. Oh, I won't lie. So they are. You are distinction level. But once you walk through that door, anything could happen. Maybe the examiner has a big nose, or maybe he has wrinkly hands, or maybe he has a horrible English accent that you just can't understand. Maybe there's a draft that's tickling the bottom of your foot. Maybe the piano has keys that just don't feel the same as you're used to. It doesn't matter. All I care is you walk through the door at distinction standard. I will not care what mark you come out with. I will be happy no matter what happens in that room. And I think that's a very important lesson for parents. I sometimes hear my parents say, oh, you'll get in trouble if you don't get distinction. No. The only thing you'll be in trouble for is you're not distinction level before you walk through that door, in mind. And I know some students, it may be harder to get to distinction level. And maybe if I was only doing face-to-face, I might say, oh, you're only credit level. You are credit level, but because we have recorded exams, I don't do that. But, this concept is, this is your actual mark. This is who you are. You are a student who is capable of distinction. Now, enjoy the exam and don't worry about it. And the fact that they know that we're not worried, that can help. So that's a very long answer to, I think your idea is very good. It can be tweaked in many ways, but it's a very good idea. It gives both experiences and both skill sets to a student.
Well, that's something we have learned from Sarah. You see that one simple thing she can share so much, especially with when you talk to parents. So teachers, I think that's what we need to learn. Perhaps in the future we can have to invite Sarah to run some of those workshops. Communication skills. I really think that now teachers, we are so focused on our teaching. Sometimes we do not communicate with our parents. We do not educate enough our parents. And remember, now our parents are all lay people. They could be, that professions in their own field, but they know very little about music. Yeah, superficially, I think they know, I must take this exam and, but it's come to learning. So we must learn how to communicate. Huh? So can we use the Asian word chop you first? Means we invite you first and we reserve you first, Sarah. 好不好? Yeah, 好，你就说好，
很好，
很好，太棒了，很好。
可是英文，
可是说英文。Wonderful. So another question is, which is more important in a performance exam, fluency or accurate notes rhythm? Would a performance with fluency but less accurate notes, rhythm be better than a performance with accurate notes, rhythm but less fluent? I think, Peter, you want to take these questions?
I'll take this question. I can. I think it really depends. I was just looking at that question earlier, and I think it's a very interesting question. And I think, I think it really depends on the ratio. I think at the end of the day, I'll say a fluent performance with slightly less accurate rhythm or a little slips, like I think if slips of notes and things like that, it can be understood as probably like Sarah saying, anything that happened on the day or in the moment that you may have little slips, unless it's really horrible, just misreading completely and then you play fluently. But that's really a rare case, I think. But if you have a performance with accurate notes, but then it's not fluent at all, I think you're in a little bit more trouble. I think and I think from this perspective, when you're comparing, I think another set of comparison I like to draw attention to is that I think this is often actually asked. When you play a more difficult piece less well than an easier piece more well, which one gets more mark? Which one will score higher? I think that's a very interesting comparison as well, and that's what I've always been asked, and that's how when we always actually encounter in a competition or an exam. And I think from that perspective, I would say pick one that you're more comfortable. So pick the slightly easier one and actually do it to perfection or to outstandingly, because I don't think if you pick a very difficult one and if you show any sign of struggle, I don't think you will be awarded those bonus points. So that's, again, going back to the choosing the right repertoire. I think that's a very, very common comparison. Not necessarily the more difficult piece will get you the higher mark, yes.
And it's different to live performance. An exam marks those categories. In a live performance, rhythm trumps all. In an exam, rhythm is worth a percentage of the mark and notes is worth a percentage of the mark. But if you are accompanying your church and you decide to stop and get the rhythm wrong, the poor church. So much better to have every single note wrong and keep the rhythm, but it's a different context. So there, and sight reading is similar, that it's better to have the wrong note because rhythm trumps all, but not in marking.
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. The word trump is from a game. I just realized you might think I mean a president. The word trump is where you have a card that wins. So if I trump you, it doesn't matter what your card hand was. I have the trump card and I win the game. So that's why I mean, rhythm is that card in other contexts, but exam performance is different because the criteria are equally weighted.
I think we have discussed a lot of, what to do, what makes this, how to achieve all that. Now, I think we talk a lot about what. So maybe teachers also want to know like how to, right? How to achieve this. I think for the other sessions, what we have discussed, I think it's a bit messy on this. No, I think for teachers teaching, we're divided into two sections. One is more on the contents. We do teach on the notes, the rhythm, the articulations, and what else that we have? Reading, singing, movement, listening, all this. And it is come from the pedagogical aspect. How to teach, what to say, how to inspire them. These are all the how and how. These are more on the pedagogical stuff. Of course, then we come in with a lot of creative ideas, right? So maybe for Peter's and Sarah's, what is your best advice for our teachers in their teaching career?
Ooh, big question. I'll probably start.
Okay, maybe we have no, this question we have not discussed before. So maybe we have Peter and Sarah just think about. I think there's really a lot of self-upgrading on that. And I've noticed actually, especially for the coming year's exam, I browsed all these pieces. And in fact, I took 2 weeks to move on to the detailed analysis, every single page, every chord, every phrase, and the structures. And I noticed that they have introduced so many new composers that we do not know. We have Japanese composer, not just Nakata, but we have Yoshino Dakada, Zhongtian Zixi. We have even Indian composer, Poland composer, Caribbean-born composer, and also we have Sonny Chai, I think Australian, Sonny Chai is a Malaysian composer, but Australian. Yeah, so African composer, African-American. So these are the composers that we do not learn even in our learning time in conservatory also. So as a teacher, how do we know the style? How do we play all this you know, with the right style and right feel, right interpretation, especially come to jazz. And most of us, we are classical trained. Yeah. So what is your advice for teachers?
I think I have an answer now. That question was so big. It probably is worth a whole section. But I've already given my main piece of advice, and that is teach like a pyramid. When we teach a concept, how wide do we teach it? Do we just say, this is the G clef, it marks G, or this is the G clef, and then every good word is a fruit? That has no conceptual information. But what about this is a G clef? Have you noticed that the treble clef is actually just a G done in fancy cursive writing with a line through it to decorate it? It is a G. It is telling us this is where G is. If we move that clef, we move the G. Luckily for us, we don't move it anymore. But the concept that the G moves, and I always pull out examples and show students, here is an example where the G is on the bottom line, and here is one where it's higher up, showing them this is actually a G. If they know this is a G, then their understanding is broadening this way. So my biggest advice would be, don't rush over the fundamentals. We want to make sure that they are so ingrained, because really good fundamentals means fast progress to grade 8, not the upside down way. And my advice for style is listen to recordings. And Peter's already said this. Even for me, and my special focus, in case you haven't guessed, is early Baroque music. That is my main area. That is what I'm writing my thesis on. And that is my focus. And yet, if I am going to perform an early Baroque piece, I will listen to other people's performances, not Joe Bloggs, who's a student who's done grade 5. But who are professionals? Who are playing them on their original instruments? Because often people who play on original instruments have studied widely in order to want to do that. So listen to those performances. Try and play along with them, because that can help with that sense of fluency. Catch the style by listening. I think for children, it's like learning a language. You know, when I tried to speak Chinese, I have no Chinese friends where I live, and so I don't get to practice. And you probably could tell my accent was ridiculous. But if I was in China, my accent slips into the accent of where I am. And I come back home, people, oh, you've got such and such an accent, because that's where I've been. And same for music. They will get the accent we want if they listen enough to music which has that accent. And so be very critical when you choose your YouTube channels to listen to. I won't name any, but some of them would not pass an exam. And some of those channels are very big and have, you know, huge numbers of subscribers, but they would not pass the exam if they did it. And so choose professionals. There's one of the universities in America, I think it might be the University of Texas, has a pedagogy channel, which has a lot of pieces played by professors. So, this is somebody who is more likely to have a historical knowledge. I think that listening to a recording regularly so that it becomes your accent, and then trying to play along with it and trying to emulate it. In the higher grades, I'd say listen to multiple. But in the lower grades, just as a teacher, I can say, listen to this recording. I really like this recording. They can get the style from that to start off with. And when they're older, they can be more critical. And, I like this of this performer and this of this performer. But yeah, that would be my 2 advices. Listen and teach like a pyramid.
Thank you. How about Peter?
My advice would be just be like Sarah. I think there are a couple of qualities. I think when it comes to being a good teacher or just having a long-lasting career, I think being a passionate teacher, being a very caring and full of compassion, understanding what student and all students needs a really tailored approach, and then picking the right syllabus to suit the students' learning is very, very important, like what Sarah has covered. And I think this, from the years of experience and running organization or schools or managing examiners, I think to have, basing on what you were talking about, Alice, I think to be very responsible is very important. And I think this responsible character comes from taking regular, probably professional development. If you look at Sarah, she's still taking her always learning. She's always learning, taking up new challenges, and then she has so many degrees behind her back, and then so many different diplomas. She has 30 different instruments. I think that level of responsibility is so important because we live now in the day that I think resources are so accessible. Like as Sarah was saying, you can go on YouTube and find master classes with Lan Lan and Darren Barenboim. You see, is it just it's so accessible. You have all these rich resources that are for free. And then so if you come across new set of pieces that's published in the ABRSM, you can find a lot of examples, a lot of composers, let's say teaching tips, or sometimes Christopher Norton has all these set of videos that he published himself on how to play those pieces. And then I think it's up to the teacher to actually go that extra mile, because the teacher's piano repertoire is crazy amount, you know, like it's enough that you won't be able to cover it in your whole lifetime, but then you can actually always do lots of development. And then when I say resources are so accessible, as we were discussing earlier, the Van Klaben competition, you know, all these international competition, they're all live streamed. You can find all the top quality videos or clips of how the piece should be played. And then if you actually do that extra mile, I've had a friend, you know, who would actually participate in all these professional competitions. And then if he himself wasn't professionally trained, but then they would actually go that extra mile to actually listen to all these big competitions or small competitions or all these varying, let's say, activities or events to actually boost your knowledge and boost your experience, and to always at the forefront of education. I think it's very important. So I think these are the sort of qualities. I think that's my sort of piece of advice. And then summarize to just
never stop learning. So that's what we always share with teachers from this group, is that the more we know, we do not know. That's the reason why that we learn and we meet, you know, each other every week. So if you're a young teacher, you may follow Sarah's from the Facebook forum. I think she really give a lot of good tips. And also FingerSmart, we do invite speakers to give us some of the talk. And recently now we will be going for our 4th session with Dr. Christine from UCSI on contemporary repertoire. And we learn composer, living composer, even the commission piece for Van Kalbren competitions. So this is very interesting, very interesting. Allow me to share one of these videos of what upcoming event from our side here. Here, that's what we meet up with teachers. And every 2 years that we have the teachers training on the syllabus. Just let me share on the videos here so you have an idea. If you're the young teachers that you think that you want to walk through the exam pieces with us, this is what you can maybe, you know, take on. Thank you. So this is upcoming. So if you're interested, you may join us for our Zoominar for next week. Then we will share with you more info. So I think we're so blessed today with 2 speakers from Australia. Peter Wang, don't forget, Peter Wang and Sarah Porter. Amazing. These 2 amazing people from Australia. Now we love Australia so much.